Hello and welcome to Pain in the Podcast, your place to find out everything you've ever wanted to know about pain. My name's Dr. Joseph Parsons and I'm joined by the wonderful Don Widgesoria and Dr. Joshua Craw. And we're joined by a very special guest today to talk about pacing. Welcome in. Hello and welcome to Pain in the Podcast, and today we are going to be talking about pacing, and we are joined by a pain and rheumatology specialist occupational therapist, Aimee Forster, who works at Bradford Teaching Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust. So before we get into our facts and learnings about ourselves, Aimee, would you like to tell us a little bit more about you and about what an occupational therapist does in terms of pain management?
Yes, hello. Very big question as to what an occupational therapist does. We are a small bunch, but we help people with working through things that they want and or need to do. So things that are essential, like your day-to-day tasks, but also things that you enjoy, whether that be something within the house or whether that be something massive like a hobby. Our role can sometimes look like giving out equipment or helping people with mental health difficulties. It can also help with physical change, such as being on an inpatient ward, like someone who's had a hip fracture, and helping people get back to home or wherever is kind of suitable or safe for them. My career started as a rotational therapist, as lots of occupational therapists do when we come out of uni. So I had rotations within the hands department, so outpatient hands, stroke and neurology, and then general inpatient respiratory, which covered the acute respiratory care unit as well. So my role was very different in each of those areas, but the overlap with occupational therapy anywhere is that we are very biopsychosocial trained, which means we look at people holistically. We're not just looking at physical things, we're looking at actually how are you emotionally, how are you understanding these things, and looking at someone's full life rather than just the injury or the illness that they've got. My career then moved me over to rheumatology, where I'm at Bradford. So in rheumatology, an occupational therapist role is very day-to-day, very different. Each patient's very different. So sometimes I'm looking at hands in terms of deformities and the main focus is splinting. Sometimes I'm giving exercises to get someone, particularly the hands, a lot stronger. Sometimes I am doing more pacing, which is hopefully what we're going to look a bit more at today, sleep education, and we see patients both with diagnosed rheumatological conditions and also diagnosed persistent pain conditions as well. I do a little bit of private work as well, where I'm predominantly working in it's a massive topic, but just a pain specialist role as well. And that's a little bit about me.
Amazing. I mean, I could not have asked for a more comprehensive kind of understanding of OT. We spoke a little bit before we came on air about this, about occupational therapy being something which maybe doesn't get the attention and people don't necessarily understand what it means when they come into a healthcare setting. But I really hope now, after hearing that, people recognise just how broad OT is and how much of sort of it can impact your day-to-day life, and particularly when you're living with long-term illness. So, yeah.
I'll be honest, I've learned a lot more about OTs in that short introduction there as well. As a doctor, I always thought it was just getting handrails and what have you. That was my understanding.
And that's often the misconception, isn't it? I think people with a lot of professions, they'll shrink OT down to things like equipment and they'll shrink physio down to exercise. And I think it's nice when we can shed a light on what more there is to the profession.
Absolutely.
Shall we then, bouncing straight back to you, Aimee, start with a fact about yourself, and then we'll share all of our facts.
A fact about myself is that, well, obviously I'm recording from home. So currently downstairs I've got a 14-week-old puppy who I'm hoping is behaving whilst I am doing this. I've tried to tire her out before we've come on. So that's a fun fact about my personal life.
Oh my gosh, what kind of puppy?
She is a dachshund puppy. She was a rescue puppy from Dogs Trust. So yeah, she's very tiny and
Does she fit in your pocket?
Slowly not. She's getting too long, actually. Her back is now, I think I measured it 29 centimetres. So
Wow.
Oh wow! So she's like I was going to
Yeah,
ask you
a foot long.
No, I was going to ask you what length of sausage she got to. Whether we were talking like a Frankfurter, a Cumberland, like. But wow, yeah, she's almost fully grown then already.
she's a full dachshund, not a miniature dachshund. So
Yeah.
yeah, we're not sure how big because obviously she was a dog's trust baby. So yeah, we will see where she ends up. But yeah, fingers crossed she's behaving.
What's her name?
Penny.
Oh, lovely.
She was called Sizzle when we adopted her. They'd named them all after sausages, so we quickly changed that.
Sizzle was too hot to handle.
I've got to be honest with you though. My wife and I did talk about getting a dachshund at some point, and it was on the agreement that we would call it chorizo. So
Nice.
But you both love chorizo, so that makes sense.
we do exactly. It works on two
so many
levels.
levels,
But right, Don, what is your fact about yourself this week?
So my fact for this week is that I really like talking to waiters and the bar staff at restaurants and bars, especially when they give you free stuff. And the free stuff turns out to be better than you would ever expect. So I was at this bar in London, and yeah, they just kept giving us free things, and I loved it. And then I just started chatting to them, and with the hopes of getting the info, the secret insights into these ingredients. And yeah, the waiter just revealed that they just buy it from another shop and just put it in these fancy pots. And I was like, oh my god! And then she offered to take a picture of it, and so now I've got 3 pictures on my phone. One is of the actual item.
What item was it, Don? We need to.
It was like these corn, like dried corn nuts with like a spicy chili and lemon coating.
Okay.
And then the other 2 pictures are just of the waiter trying to handle my phone. I think she nearly dropped it because you could just see the picture just goes everywhere, and it's really blurry. But yeah,
What's the best free thing you've got?
honestly, those corn nut things, they were phenomenal.
So it's a low bar that we
It's
set
a low
ourselves here.
But then they also they followed it up with this like crostini thing. So it's just like a toasted bread with this romesco pepper kind of topping, and with a shit ton of grana padano cheese on top. And that was fantastic.
Nice. Also, Aimee, for context, Don was a chef before retraining in psychology, hence why he's so... That's why he's eating at places where they're serving things like crostini.
I'm into food.
My fact for this week is, after learning for 17 years, I finally got past my driving test age, 33 and 363 days.
Woo!
Yay!
And what was the first thing that you did after passing your driving test, Josh? Not the first thing, but what's your first proper road trip?
Oh yeah, driving here to film this in London, which was grim.
How long did it take you?
2.5 hours.
How long should it have taken you?
An hour and 50. There was traffic. I'm blaming the traffic.
Josh spoke about being in the second of 4 lanes on the motorway and being overtaken and undertaken simultaneously while he was in a lower gear than he should have been, so his car's just screaming on the motorway.
You're just in purgatory then. You had no way out.
Well, I was like, oh, this is a pleasant drive, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot of space in front of me. I was like, well, I'm being overtaken each side.
There's a reason.
But you got here safely, and you've got a lovely car.
Yeah,
It's a brilliant car.
It's good. It's a lovely orange.
it's a very vibrant orange.
Yeah.
Burnt amber.
It's like,
Is that the colour?
They call it techno orange.
Okay.
I don't even know what that means. But
Neither do I. It's just Kia.
Okay.
Joe, what about you?
My fact this week is that I have a small scar on my chin from a hockey stick injury.
So we've both discussed our facial scars.
We have discussed our facial scars. I got this scar while in a PE lesson when I was like 15, and I was defending. And I don't play hockey, never really did, but I defended the stick with my jaw. But they didn't score, so that's the most important part.
That is the most important part.
Because your jaw is just that big.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure how it got low enough for them to get the hockey stick, but clearly I was really committed to the bit. So, yeah, there you go. And then back to you, Aimee. What have you learned about yourself this week?
This week I've learned that the dark nights and mornings are just generally a big no-no. quick summary. No need to explore that. It's it's just a big no-no. The days feel so long, and the temperature. 7 p.m. just suddenly becomes so much different when it's dark versus when there is many hours of sunlight still to go. It's really interesting how it just changes the way you think about time. So yeah, bring back summer and counting down to spring.
I mean, I think as well, when you work in healthcare, the hard part is you set off in the morning in the dark, you arrive to work, and then by the time you finish, you go home in the dark. And so for 4 months of the year, basically, you're just a vampire.
You're in the hospital, sorry, so you don't see the sunlight as well.
It's like a casino.
Yeah, but more losers.
More losers. You walk in with something and then you don't know what you're going to walk out with.
Well, that's true. Sadly.
But I was listening to this episode, this podcast, and they were discussing how unnecessary daylight savings might be, and how it's actually not that. It has like negative impacts on our health. So,
What's the idea behind why?
I don't know. I didn't get that far into the podcast,
Okay.
but I'll keep you updated. But they were just talking about how it could have negative effects on our, I think, mental health, and with that subsequently physical health as well.
Interesting.
So a lot of countries have scrapped the whole the changing of the clocks.
To be fair, I literally, even though it happened like a couple of weeks ago, I have never known, and I don't think I ever will know, when the clocks change.
Oh, no.
It's always a surprise to me.
Yeah.
Someone just goes, oh yeah, we lost an hour last night. Sure. Cool. I don't...
I forget how it works every year.
Yeah,
and then I have to figure it out every year all over again.
Here's where it is. You're looking forward to summer, so you move the clocks forward.
I'll forget that tomorrow.
I will also forget. It's a great explanation, but it's going to be
Really
in one ear,
concise,
straight out
yeah.
the other. So that's something you've learned this week, Don, but what have you learned about yourself?
What have I learned about? I've learned that I'm a terrible plant dad, and I think I've just talked about this before. But the last time I mentioned it, I think I mentioned I was a good plant dad.
Oh no.
Yeah.
The plant's been taken away from you.
A few of them have, yeah. I had this basil plant that I managed to grow in 2 different pots because I was able to propagate it. But then my housemate's mum came by and she was like, "This is bad. The leaves are sticky. You've got something wrong with these. They should not be sticky." And I was like, "What? I just rinsed it off before eating them. It's fine." And she was like, "No. This is bad." And yeah, a few of my plants I've just left outside. On a table for weeks and weeks and weeks.
That looks fine. I'm going to be honest with you.
No, that's an indoor plant. It shouldn't be outside.
I have I had like a basil plant as well in a pot in the house, and I stuck it outside because we needed room in the like kind of conservatory type room, and basically we've just had the worst amount of rain in the northwest over the past month, and so now it was half full of soil, and now the other half is just water.
Yeah.
And I've just had to give up. Like, the plant's dead.
It's not
And I
going
just thought,
anywhere.
there's no point even emptying it anymore. It's just there as kind of a testament to my poor plant
Failures.
dad skills.
Yeah. Josh, please take it away from my failures.
Yeah, sure. So I'll start with my learning is about my failures, and my learning is that I can't set off in 6th gear with a manual transmission car. Apparently, the engine doesn't like it. I've tried it in 3rd. I can set off in 3rd from cold, but
You should not be doing that.
yeah.
Josh,
But
when he
it's
bought
impressive.
his car, it's about a decade old, and
and a few.
a few. It's a really nice car, but he was like, "Oh yeah, well it's had a new clutch and everything," and Don was like, "Yeah, it'll need another one soon."
Definitely will. Especially after the motorway.
Especially after the motorway. But you made it. Speaking of motorways, my learning this week is that I despise the M6. And I think I already knew this, but to a whole new level, having spent most of the time driving down from the northwest to London on the M6, my average speed was about 35 miles an hour, and it just killed me. And funnily enough, we're recording an episode later this weekend about palliative care, and the van in front of me was a company called EOL, which in healthcare terms stands for end of life. And I thought, this is quite like prophetic, because I think I might die here. I'm driving so slowly.
Was it like, oh my god, it's Final Destination, this is it, it's happening now?
Yeah, I just thought I'd give up. So there you go. That's us.
Yeah.
But shall we get into the meat of the episode then?
Yeah, the meat and potatoes. Yeah, I think to help with the pacing of the episode, maybe we should discuss pacing a bit.
That was awful.
That was awful.
Joe, what the heck is pacing apart from just walking around the room aimlessly?
So, funnily enough that you say that, we'll get back to that later on. There's a summary definition that was made looking at loads of different studies about pacing, and they came up with a definition which says that it's an active self-management strategy where individuals learn to balance their time spent on activity and rest for the purpose of achieving increased function and participation in activities that are meaningful to them. So that can be a little bit of a mouthful, but I was wondering, Aimee, can you kind of give us some sort of a breakdown of kind of different elements that make up that pacing, so what that kind of definition might mean to a patient?
Yeah, so I would always describe pacing as like a pick and mix. I said earlier in the episode that occupational therapy is looking at what you need and what you want to do. So pacing is going to be a mixture of that. If we are just purely doing the things that we have to do, then we actually find that's a detriment to other parts of us. So I always describe it as a pick and mix of your mental tasks. So that might be focusing on things like ringing and making a bill, inquiry, or speaking to somebody on the phone, remembering things. It's also a pick and mix of your physical tasks. So things, could literally just be getting out of bed and getting dressed, or we could be talking about going walking around the supermarket or going to play hockey, as you would know, Joe. And it would be a final pick and mix would be your emotional tasks. So thinking about the things that make us both happy, but also maybe stressed, maybe excited, maybe sad. If we pick a mix between those things, then actually we find that our pacing, so managing our daily tasks, is a lot better balanced rather than it just being doing and doing and doing back to back with maybe no rest breaks in between those different tasks.
And so I think that idea of doing and doing and doing with no rest breaks tends to lean into something called a boom and bust cycle. So I don't know if, Josh, you want to talk a little bit about boom and bust.
Yeah, so boom and bust is where people sort of have periods where they're very active, they're having, let's say, a good day for the pain, for example. So they go to the shops, as Aimee said, they do all the chores that they need to do, they do something extra, they go to do something they enjoy, they might go to the bingo or play football or whatever they like to do. And then there's the bust, which is where the body is sort of reacting to all that extra activity that they've done, so they're less able moving forward. So like the day after, they're feeling very achy, so they don't want to do anything else.
Yeah. I think one of the things that's quite tough is in such a fast-paced world that we live in, there's this expectation that you've always got to be doing something, achieving something, like you've always got to be progressing in some way or another. And I think one of the things that patients can struggle with sometimes, and from my own experience sort of working with pain professionals as a patient, I think it's really hard when you're quite a high-functioning individual, which I think a lot of people I've met with pain are, and being told you need to strip things back. I think that can be quite emotionally challenging.
Yeah. And that's why I wouldn't necessarily look at it as stripping it back in terms of taking away. I would always describe it as let's just resort it out. So it might be that, yes, that task doesn't get done to the full level you would want it to get done at. But if you are doing certain elements of that task, then we're still working towards that goal. Because with your boom and bust, you almost want to imagine a really long line and then of doing activity and then a really long line of recovery. Whereas if we have little activity lines and then a little recovery line in the middle, almost like staples back to back, rather than a really long ruler at the top, that's actually going to help somebody to do more throughout a day or a week than if they just did that super long ruler line at the top, which is the boom and bust, and that's what we want to move away from.
So that was a fairly good way of putting it, and I think you convinced me that is a fairly pleasant and yet manageable approach. But what kind of language do you use when you're describing that to patients, and do you find that they do understand you and are willing to try it, or are they fairly skeptical about it?
I think it depends on what somebody is at in terms of, or where somebody is at in terms of their persistent pain journey or condition journey. Are they ready to make change? Um, Patients that are often ready to make change are happy to explore things. I also would use at the start of all of this, I normally use a fatigue diary, which I always describe as helping to guide the therapy. So I'd send somebody away and ask them to do a fatigue diary for 1 to 2 weeks and then come back and we will colour it in. And the colouring in helps give visuals of whether somebody is booming and busting. Are they actually underactive? Is there too much stress and there is no rest from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m., 11 p.m.? And sometimes it almost helps give the patient a visual of them going, gosh, no wonder I'm tired. Look at, and I might colour it in the standard teacher mode of red for angry colours. If there's loads of red blocks on there, then they almost can't argue because it gives a really big visual of, yeah, no wonder you're tired. I think the bit where we can have a bit of pushback is the really busy patients where they've got, young children, they have a career, and that's where pacing is really challenging to try and fit into an already very busy, non-flexible schedule.
I suppose it's sort of giving the patient insight into their own sort of limitations then as well, isn't it? And that actually you're doing too much and, as you said, not stripping back, but sort of like managing things better and chunking it almost.
Yeah. Because there's the International Association for the Study of Pain. We spoke about them a few times over the course of the podcast. But there was a study called "Can Individuals with Chronic Pain Do Too Much?" And the "too much" was in inverted commas for their study, if you ever want to find the paper. And the basic kind of giving a very simple conclusion from quite a complicated paper, it basically says that people who are habitually overactive, so those people who have the very busy lives, who are always doing so much, they have greater variation in their pain, and so it makes it harder for them to predict that kind of progress of their pain. And I think that in itself can be a real challenge for patients when you don't know from one day to the next whether you're going to be kind of able to manage a task. It makes planning really difficult. And so kind of to flip it on its head, actually a key part of this, correct me if I'm wrong, Aimee, to find this better balance is to have a better kind of relationship with planning activities and prioritising.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's looking at what you need to do, but also what you want to do. And I think that's where, as you said earlier in the episode, Joe, that life is really busy. It's high pressured. We are a very fast paced nation, and that can often leak into people's way of understanding of life and how life should be and should look. And I think then we end up with someone with an unexpected diagnosis of persistent pain or long-term condition, and it really throws a spanner in the works. And that's when we almost have to relearn how to soothe as such. So a lot of pacing as well is looking at actually that nervous system. Are we regulating that nervous system? Are we allowing it to be up at the top all the time in kind of your boom cycles, or are we actually regulating it to kind of settle that nervous system down to allow your brain and your body to kind of go, yes, I can just relax for a little bit.
So when you guys talk about this boom and bust kind of theory, does it follow the same lines as the whole concept of like doing what you like the least first thing in the morning, which a lot of people kind of stick to, where they want to get the most tedious tasks done and out of the way earlier so that they can enjoy the rest of the day with more fun tasks?
To a degree, yes, but the problem is that, like Aimee said, you've got to prioritise activities that are meaningful to you as well. So often with people that I've spoken to who live with persistent pain, you often want to get those kind of, in inverted commas, essential tasks out the way. So you might have the physical and mental energy to drop your kids off at school, to sort out your gas bill, to reply to some emails, to join a work meeting, and then actually after that you feel you're completely knackered for the whole day and it's kind of written you off. Whereas if it's really important to you to go to karaoke with your friends, if you have to cancel on that every time that you get invited out because you're just doing the things that you feel are essential, actually kind of life loses its meaning, really. You're living, but you're not having much quality of life. So it's about finding that balance where we're not just prioritizing things we feel we have to do, but prioritizing things that bring us joy. And that, because we spoke about this before, the idea of distraction for pain, like doing things you enjoy can really help to take your mind off it. And if you never do things you enjoy, it becomes quite easy to kind of dwell.
Yeah,
What's the point? Yeah.
My question is, though, so we're talking about pacing, we've talked about boom and bust. In your opinion, Aimee, does pacing work? And if so, does it work for everybody?
Yes, I would say there's a really simple answer, yes, because I think everybody is different. So I think it works at different levels for different people because people have different lives. I think it's also really important to acknowledge the emotional and mental tasks that go on in a daily life. I think it's really easy when we think about pacing to think about the physical things that we have to do, like get up, get dressed, like you said, drop the kids off at school, go to work or go care for somebody, whatever our days look like. But actually we might not be thinking about the mental element that has to go in, the planning around, next week I need to remember to do this, this and this. Actually, that's physical energy that we're using as mental energy, that we're using as well. And I think when we think about pacing and does it work for everybody, it can, because you can pull what skills you need from pacing. A good visual to kind of describe what you were just exploring there, Joe, was thinking about, have you heard of the sand, rock and pebble jar?
No, I haven't.
Okay. So the sand, rock and pebble jar is thinking about sand being the things that we have to do. Some patients actually find it really helpful to get a little jar that they keep on the window ledge in the kitchen. But if your jar is just filled with sand, i.e. the tasks that we have to do, and there is no room for pebbles and or rocks, pebbles being the things that we can squeeze in on a daily or every other day basis. So it might be just having your favourite hot drink, or it might be listening to your favourite podcast. And then your rocks are things that we can't necessarily get in every day, but we might get them in once a week or once a month. So normally the bigger hobbies or meeting with certain people that we don't see all the time, things that help boost us. So things that help us to feel good, both physically and mentally and emotionally. So pacing isn't just about taking breaks. Yes, that's a massive part of it, is really looking at day to day, but that pick and mix is so important to really think about, where are my tasks coming from, in terms of, am I just running around like a headless chicken all the time, or am I actually taking time to slow that nervous system down and think about soothing and the things that I enjoy?
Well, what struck me with this whole process as you were describing it, Aimee, was how kind of endearing it is from a kind of professional view, because I feel like you really get to know your patients, their ins and outs, their daily lives, what their interests are, what they kind of dislike, and it kind of brings a very human connection to the process.
Absolutely. I love my job. I think working with people at this level is so important and so vital. Sometimes part of my sessions are just listening, because it ends up that we work out there's actually a lot of stress going on, and physically we can't take a lot out of somebody's day to day. But let's look at stress techniques. Let's look at managing this stress. We can't take out that you have to drop your kids off at school, or that you're worried about work, or work is really high pressured and you can't take a rest break there. Let's try and find some soothers. So let's listen to some music while you're on your lunch break to try and give you a boost. Let's take your favourite lunch. Let's try and think about what you're listening to and what you're doing as you're driving or commuting to work. So let's try and look at pacing from a whole different view, rather than it just being this booming and busting and taking regular breaks. We can think about actually who is somebody and what makes them tick. And yeah, that's what I really enjoy about it.
See, I really love this pick and mix definition. I've not actually heard people describe it like this before, because in the science around pacing, like studies where they've tried to look if it works, the definition is often very inconsistent. So some studies will just talk about taking activities away. Some people talk about more activity planning, and kind of it will depend on the study what they're classing pacing as. And basically the studies where it suggests that it doesn't work, or that it's associated with more sort of avoidance behaviours, so not wanting to engage in activity, tend to be those ones where it's talking specifically just about that taking away, that stepping back, the adding in more rest. But actually, when you have things that try and find meaningful activities for people and make suggestions of how they can fit these in a sustainable way, you get a much more positive kind of set of results.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think it also gives people permission to go for a walk in the park after a busy shift. Oops, yeah, I'm working physically, but I really love walking. I love a certain park. Or no, actually walking doesn't work for me. I really enjoy speaking on the phone to a family member, so I'm going to ring them as I drive. And they can almost, if we view it from a boosters and a drainers point of view, it helps somebody to go, there's almost a lot of reflection work goes on with pacing, and that's why it takes time to work with people, because we're often kind of working across a different sections of somebody's life, and it really is important to kind of go, what makes me feel boosted and what makes me feel drained, and then that can help to give a level of control to often a situation that somebody feels very out of control with.
I suppose my question then is, you said it's quite a reflective sort of practice, particularly between yourselves and the patients. Are there any patients where you feel like actually pacing just isn't for them at all? Or is it a case of you feel like everybody can benefit from pacing?
I think everybody can benefit from it, because even if I've had patients before who, might have been new parents, so we can't take away the fact that they are up during the night, or that they have rather large stressors going on in terms of a whole life change. But actually, let's look at the things that just on a small level help you to feel boosted. So what really helps you feel grounded and feel soothed. So whether that just being that on the morning you make sure you've got your favourite breakfast in, or you wear your comfy pyjamas that feel quite a nice texture on your skin. There's lots of different ways that we can look at somebody from a pacing point of view, and just look at it from, well, let's just look at soothers, let's just look at really breaking it down. But there's also people that really do work reflectively, and sometimes they'll come to me for a few sessions and there's a little bit of pushback as that reflection starts to happen, and then all of a sudden there's big changes. The negative to pacing is that I'm not at home to help people pace, and that's where the self-management side of it has to come in, which I know you guys all know from working with persistent pain and being around it all the time, that actually there's a level of self-management that makes pacing quite hard, because it's somebody potentially changing the way that they've thought about life and been, grown up around, and we're suddenly challenging, actually, let's look at this a little bit different now.
So speaking of that self-management aspect of things, and I'm sure all of us have had to deal with this before, but how do you kind of manage? So throughout our conversation, I've noticed that the language that you choose is very particular, and I feel like it's the same when it comes to your patients as well. You want to use the right kind of wording, and so how do you avoid using enabling language or detecting times where patients are kind of seeking more enabling behaviors from you as an OT? Does that make sense?
Yes. So thinking about, you mean around trying to promote independence in this?
Independence in a positive, constructive way, yeah.
A lot of the empowerment with patients comes because we're working with them in sessions where we often have time. So my sessions are not just 10 minutes with a patient where I'm kind of going, what's your issue and how can we get you out the door as quick as possible? We really have time to break things down, and that helps a patient feel listened to. And I think exploring that with a patient can give a massive tick for, gosh, someone's just listening to me. And sometimes I'm actually the start of their journey, where it's just a reflective stage one. Maybe I need to make some change. And that might be the point that we get to after just a few sessions. They're not ready to put that change into practice, but I've just started a new way of somebody maybe thinking. And then they might come back a few months later or a year later and think, no, I'm ready to make that change now. But I think because OTs work with people on such a meaningful level, there is a level of somebody just feeling heard that actually means massive changes to empowerment.
So they're just very transparent and honest with you about what they do.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny she mentioned about the timings as well. 'Cause a couple of years ago, when I was working in GP for my F2 rotation, I had longer blocks to see my patients. So instead of seeing somebody in 10 minutes, being as quick as I can, I had a full half an hour. And the difference in the feedback I got from patients was absolutely remarkable. It was night and day.
Yeah.
Just having the time to actually go through why they're there, as opposed to, my back hurts. Okay, thanks. Some naproxen, home.
Yeah. It was like when I was doing MSK physio as well, it's very similar. Is you get a patient in, you have to try and work out a diagnosis in maybe 4 to 5 minutes based on their history and a physical exam, and then come up with what you think will be a viable management or treatment strategy. And all of that you're doing in 15 minutes, 20 minutes, because you've got to finish your notes within the half hour and then get another patient in. So actually having that flexibility to open these conversations is really important. I did want to just touch on as well, I know that earlier on in my own pain journey, Josh joked earlier on, pointing at me when we were talking about people who are constantly, habitually overactive, and who do too much with their time. When I was under a pain management clinic, I pushed back a lot. I was Amy's nightmare patient. I was really difficult to manage and was very against this idea of pacing and saying, I don't have time. Like, this was when I was doing the PhD, so it was like, I've got too much work to do, there's this, there's that, this is too important, blah, blah, blah. And I think there's a lot of people out there who were like I was, who might struggle to buy into this. But I just want to point out some research around a group of people with chronic back pain, fibromyalgia or ME, basically looked at the best elements of pacing to try and improve your symptoms. And they're kind of, the key thing they said to aim for, the one that resulted in the best symptoms, was people who achieved consistency in their activities. And they found that resulted in people having significantly less pain, less fatigue, lower rates of depression, lower rates of avoidance. So actually we think of, oh, well, if I'm going to do everything all the time, I'm actually not avoiding activity. But because of the bust part of the boom-bust cycle, you do end up avoiding activity. And these people had higher levels of physical function overall. So if you imagine those of you listening who maybe struggle a little bit more with your physical health and maybe don't manage to get out of the house, you might spend most of your time in bed. These pacing type approaches might be that difference between being able to get out of bed more often, or to go down to the end of your road to get a taxi, to go somewhere to do something meaningful. Like, it might feel like you're stripping things back, but trying to find what allows you to achieve consistency can actually really help you manage your symptoms.
I just think it's such a tall task to put on the shoulders of a therapist, of an occupational therapist, because you really do. I'm just blown away by how connected you are to the patient, how well you get to know them, and the creativity that it must take for you to identify areas of their lives that they might not even think about as being a priority or a soother, as you said, like the texture of the fabrics on their skin, or a stressor. It's just blowing me away right now.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I will reiterate, I love my job. I love occupational therapy, and I'm so lucky that I found it. I just love, even with pacing as a whole, like, I can get a referral that is absolutely not for pacing, and then sometimes we end up going down that route to help them manage their pain or their condition. Sometimes it is for pacing, and that's the word that we have on the referral. But actually, what is pacing? It looks different for each and every one of us, because we are so unique as humans. So sometimes I'm literally doing breath work with somebody, and I'm doing more kind of the grounding and anxiety, and looking at kind of let's bring this system down. Sometimes we've got somebody who's not doing a lot, and we think, right, let's just even get you moving around your bedroom, or let's just kind of think about what can you do that even means if you're in bed, let's pace within that environment, or let's make sure that we can try and get you up and get you out of that room, so that the brain starts to change the way it associates with different environments, and in a positive way, which, yeah, often pacing is just part of a jigsaw of managing persistent pain. There's lots of different routes that we can go down, but it's just one piece of that very important jigsaw.
I wanted to ask, so at what point in the treatment process and the referral process do you introduce pacing to your patients?
I'd say, well, often session one. Let's start as we mean to go on. But session one isn't going to be a deep dive. It's more going to be exploring someone's life. So it's often more as an assessment as to how does somebody's life look in terms of pacing as a skill and breaking it down. We'd probably start with session two onwards. But it really just depends on where somebody is at. Like I said, sometimes, and as a clinician, you have to accept that you're not going to be able to change and work with everybody. And sometimes I'm just part of that stepping stone, is where they start to reflect and go, yep, I understand, I'm just not ready right now. And then they come back. But yeah, pretty much as soon as we can, really, because it's so important to help somebody manage their condition.
I think there's a study that basically was talking to physiotherapists and asking what their thoughts were on using pacing with patients, and I think this puts it in a really good light. What you're saying about kind of not getting straight in on that first appointment and kind of building up to that over time. You're working with a group of people who often have been very passive in their treatment for a long time. So we, as a society, often expect medicine to be done to us rather than with us. We don't necessarily buy in as sort of... It's a principle called self-efficacy, so being effective in your own self-management. And if you're working with people who have been very passive in their healthcare for a long time, introducing this concept where immediately the onus is not put directly onto them, but like a large part of their healthcare becomes self-management, can be quite challenging. So it's that building it up over time, giving people something to try, let them go away, give things a go, see what happens, come back. And it's like you say, this reflective process of tweaking things bit by bit until you find what works for that patient.
And I think making the learning as well different. So sometimes we might use like the fatigue diaries, sometimes we might be drawing things out. We have different worksheets. Sometimes it's just like verbal chats and education, and we can really vary that appointment to suit different patient needs, because some patients have struggled with persistent pain and or fatigue for 10, 20 years. So we're trying to kind of work with, actually, let's just try and make life a little bit more, kind of the way you want it to be, rather than looking at a massive dramatic change. And I think it's trying to work with them on that.
Yeah, I think you've hit on a really important thing there, is that chronic pain isn't just about the pain. The fatigue, I feel like, is one of the bigger impacts into your life, because even if you're having a good pain day, but you're just so exhausted and you can't feel like you can't do anything, I think that's a bigger impact than necessarily the pain.
Yeah, absolutely.
Particularly on motivation as well.
Of course, yeah.
Speaking of motivation, I'd be quite interested to know, Aimee, if you have noticed a certain demographic of patients, whether that be age or gender, who kind of grasp the concept of pacing easier, or ones who struggle with it maybe?
Yeah, I'd say it depends on their pain journey. I'd say I wouldn't necessarily put it down to a demographic. There is a level of kind of the education level around diet, around looking after yourself as a whole, is maybe a little bit lower. They might not, as you said, Joe, the people that are often running really fast really do struggle with pain and kind of making that up and down in terms of dramatic highs and dramatic lows of pain. I think everybody's quite different, and it almost depends on where they're at in their journey. So has that conversation been had before, or is this a whole new way of thinking in terms of self-management, like you said? If they've gone their whole life where everything has been given and everything has been done on terms of I've got a problem, you try and fix it, rather than I try and fix it because I don't have that understanding of looking after myself in certain ways, they're the demographics that can be quite challenging. But I think there's different ways of developing relationships with somebody that helps them feel heard and works at a pace that they need to. So we're pacing within pacing.
I think from an OT point of view, when I was first sort of introduced to occupational therapy, I basically kind of came to the conclusion that the best possible problem to be sat next to you when you have a problem is an OT, because they learn to break things down into such they break every activity, every problem down into small chunks and kind of help you to recognize how you're going to go about solving a problem. But one thing that I think a lot of other professions, like particularly in medicine and physiotherapy, and to a degree in psychology as well, we have this kind of desire that we need to fix something. And I think by the sounds of it, Aimee, you're more sort of able to sit with this feeling of the patient might not be fixed. I think a lot of the time we're desperate for something to be done and finished, whereas you're more comfortable by the sounds of it as a clinician to be with that patient along that journey and to accept that sometimes things might not work and you might need to change things. And I think that's a really healthy attitude for clinicians to take when managing people with pain and managing with pacing more generally.
Absolutely. And I think it takes time to build that resilience and that skill. Working with patients with long-term conditions and persistent pain is tiring, and that's not a negative to anybody who's listening. That's the truth. Working with people is tiring, particularly when we're holding people in a space that's often quite a vulnerable one and quite a negative, outlook of my life feels out of control right now. And in order to build up that resilience and to be able to work with each and every patient to 100%, actually, I have to build up skills that mean I look after me. So I have to take my own advice, as much as it is hard, because I would say I fit into that fast running kind of person, but it's trying to look at my soothers and my boosters and my drainers to try and work out actually what do I need to do to look after me as well in all of this, and not take it personally. Unfortunately, we have to separate ourselves from the patient, and if somebody doesn't make change or is really struggling to make change, I can only do what I can do, because as I said earlier, I'm not at home with somebody, so we can give as much empowerment as possible, and that's kind of where I need to sit, so that I don't take everything home and become kind of fatigued myself.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
I like that.
Yeah.
Is that like a proverb?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
My boss says that to me.
Also, just going on that other proverb is physician heal thyself. So making sure that you look after yourself when you're treating other people as well.
I've also not heard of that. This is every day's a school day, isn't it? Just one thing as well, before we sort of move towards the end of the episode. I think that sort of in the literature, there's a lot of evidence that basically says that clinicians often feel that pacing is like a last resort. And so they think that you're seeing a patient who's maybe at the end of their journey, and you've tried to do every scan and test and investigation first, and then you finally, in their opinion, almost like given up, and now you're doing things like pacing. But I hope that people listening today have learned that pacing is something that we can start to embrace from day one, and that it doesn't just have to mean stripping things back. I think even before this episode, Aimee, to be completely candid with you, I thought that would always be an element of pacing, because that's how it's been presented to me in the past. But actually, I feel very enlightened about how individualized pacing can be for different people.
Absolutely. And I think another little activity that people could maybe do now is if they get a pen and paper is draw out. I always describe it as a IKEA stool. So if we look at the top level, and then we've got 3 legs, you'll have seen an IKEA stool hopefully that looks like that. I'm yet to get anybody who says no. So if we have one leg that's drive, and that is the things that get us up, get us going, want us to get to work, and we have threat, which is a different leg. So things that make us feel kind of adrenalized. So for example, I'm going to get up and come to work because the threat is that I'm not going to get paid, or I'm not going to be able to pay my bills, etc., etc. And then the third and final leg is soothe. And that are the things that make us feel safe, the things that make us feel cared for, and the things that make us feel kind of boosted. We want that IKEA stool. We want those legs to be as level as possible. And what we often find is that the drive is kind of sat a little bit halfway point. The threat is absolutely massive, and soothe is very often quite small. So the simple question is, which is why I like the IKEA stool analogy, is the IKEA still going to stand up? And people could maybe have a go at doing that themselves, of really thinking, where is my drive? Where is my threat? And where is my soothe? And that can help to give a really good visual of what do I need to put into my day to help make that stool balance.
And if you really want to do like a hands-on activity, you could go and buy an IKEA stool and saw accordingly. I just want to point out as well, something for the listeners at home. Both Josh and Don have drawn an IKEA stool, and I'm going to put a picture of them on the social media because Josh's is fucking terrible. What? And Don's is really good. Josh's looks like a...
That looks like a maths question on a GCSE exam. Find the angle?
I thought it looked more like a...
it's a vertex, sort of like the British military sign.
I thought it looked like a linguistic character.
Yeah, like an Egyptian ankh or something.
Yeah, exactly.
I think Aimee needs to see these.
Oh, don't show my notes, my handwriting.
There you go. That's Josh's stool.
Brilliant. Yeah, I see.
And then that's mine. The bottom.
Nice.
It's a McDonald's M.
Absolutely, yeah.
Don's is way better. But yeah, so I think at that point we'll start to kind of bring the episode to a close. But I just want to mention briefly as well, one of the tools that we often use to kind of canvass people's thoughts about chronic pain is through Reddit. So we might ask a question on Reddit to see what people's feedback is, because then it means we're not just asking the same people that we know or our own network. You can kind of get a broader idea. And I put a question out from my own genuine experience and saying, I've really struggled with pacing in the past. I feel like I'm a high-functioning individual and I struggle to find a balance. I don't know if it's helping with my pain. Has anyone had a good or bad experience with it? And half the people that responded didn't know what pacing is.
Wow.
So I really hope that this episode has done something to combat that, and I will put it in the replies to the people who didn't know what pacing is when we've uploaded this. But yeah, I feel like we've learned a hell of a lot today. Actually, the reason why we asked Aimee to come on in the first place was a really, really lovely summary document she made on behalf of the Bradford Teaching Hospitals NHS Trust about pacing and how to pace. So we will share that with the listeners in the show notes.
Along with the link to the IKEA stool.
Along with a link to the IKEA store for those who really want to get involved hands-on.
IKEA sales are going to be rocketing.
Use discount code.
Yeah,
Nope.
Exactly. If only we had a sponsorship. But yeah, so thank you again, Aimee, so much for joining us today. And I hope everyone who's listening has gained a little bit more of an idea about how valuable pacing can be, and also just how important occupational therapy is in the management of pain. So
I think that's
I
what
was
I've
just
taken from
about to
this.
say, yep. I've learned so much, and my perception of OTs have definitely changed. Yeah.
And so thanks again, Aimee.
Thank you.
It's great. I'm happy to fly the flag whenever. I'm very much an advocate for OT. So if you work with us as a clinician and you work in an MDT with OTs, use us, ask questions, because we are a valuable resource that's often a very small part of a big piece. So yeah, thank you so much for having me though, guys. I really enjoyed it.
You've been lovely.
Thanks, Aimee.
Thanks, Aimee.
Aimee. And so, yeah, Aimee was an amazing guest, and we will finish this episode as we usually do with our book review. And today we are reviewing Unwell Women by Eleanor Cleghorn, which is a really awesome book, to be honest, about of a similar vein to Pain and Prejudice by Gabrielle Jackson, talking about how basically women's health has been neglected throughout history, and it really does sort of a deep dive all the way from sort of ancient Greece and the ancient Romans, which obviously is the kind of stuff that we really love here on the podcast. For example, Pliny the Elder, friend of the podcast, thought that menstrual blood could kill crops, kill bees, and drive dogs mad. So that's the kind of stuff that she goes into, these sort of very odd prehistoric beliefs of about women's health. And Aretarus, a 2nd century Roman, thought that uterus was an animal inside of an animal, the animal being the human, and thought that it responded to sweet or fetid smells. So if you wanted it to say that you'd had a bit of a prolapse, to get your any of your sexual organs to go back in. They thought that you would have to get the womb to run away, so they'd put a really stinky herbal fumigation. I shit you not. And they thought that if someone was having maybe some mental health issues or something like that, they assumed that it was because the uterus was wandering around and causing problems with other organs. So to draw it back to the correct place, they would use sweet-smelling things and stick it near your vagina to waft it back into the right location.
Does that not make you want to come out, though? If it's sweet, this smells
You've got
nice,
to balance it, haven't you?
Okay, got to balance
sweet,
it.
Sweet, sweet, and then fetid.
Fetid.
This sounds like playing Pokemon. How do you get Snorlax to awaken?
Poker flute.
Yeah, but in this case, it's just smells.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, she goes all the way from kind of these early discussions of misunderstandings of women's health all the way up to the modern day, and sort of, for example, the backflow theory of endometriosis, which was the idea that during menstruation there would be some backflow that contained endometrial tissue, which would then grow and form these kind of lesions that we see in endometriosis, which is now believed not to be true. But it speaks about kind of these misconceptions that live on to the current day. So a really, really good book, well worth reading, particularly if you want to understand where some of these misnomers about women's health come from. And with that, anything else we want to add before bringing this episode to a close?
Thank you very much to Aimee for coming on the podcast. She was fantastic.
Absolutely, yeah.
If you want to hear more sort of information about pacing, you can listen to our breakdown in a week's time, which you can access through our Patreon for a paltry £3 a month.
It's not even a coffee nowadays, is it?
It's not, depressingly. And with that, we will see you in a fortnight for our episode on pain in palliative care.